Hello everybody, it's Walter, your favorite historian, educator, professor, and social studies extraordinaire. Today's date is October 1st, 2025, and this video is entitled, The Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party is, of course, one of the most famous events in American history, certainly one that everybody has heard of, even if you don't know exactly why it happened or what occurred during the event per se. This video will give you a bit more context into why the Boston Tea Party occurred and what exactly happened during that famous event. Now, the Boston Tea Party stands out to me as an event in American history, a classic one where the aggressor, commits an act, ends up getting slapped back down, and then wants to play victim. We're all familiar with these type of situations. And that's exactly what happened here. So let's turn the clock back 252 years to colonial Massachusetts, most specifically in the city of Boston. The colony itself is in a state of general discontentment over nearly a decade of perceived unjust taxation by the British Crown and Parliament. The colonists are not mad that they are being taxed per se, but they are angry that they are being taxed because they do not have direct representation in the British Parliament. They are represented virtually, okay? And to them, that is illegal and unconstitutional, and thus Parliament has no right to tax them in the first place because they are not being represented literally and directly. Remember the saying, no taxation without representation, is where all that comes from. All right? You remember a lot of these taxes from social studies class in school. The Sugar Act, the infamous Stamp Act, the Revenue Act, all of the Townshend Acts, okay? All of these acts are perceived as very unjust by the colonists in Massachusetts. And they're still very much reeling over the imposition of them and their repeal. And by the early 1770s, you have the Boston Massacre, which I cover in a separate video. So the colony of Massachusetts is very, very discontented at this point because England's taxation policies have disrupted the local economy and the way of life as they have been enjoying it for quite some time. So the Tea Party, all that said, the Boston Tea Party happens as a direct result of the Tea Act of 1773 enacted by the British Parliament. The Tea Act of 1773, unlike so many other laws enacted aimed at the colonies, had the direct effect of removing all duties on tea that was imported into the colonies from the British East India Company. The British East India Company was near insolvency, okay? And this act was designed to essentially save it from bankruptcy so that the colonists would be able to buy this tea in large amounts. Because remember, there are no duties put on it at this point, so it's far cheaper than other tea that's coming from colonial competitors, primarily the Dutch. Now, you would think that the colonists would be happy at that, right? Not so. See, what had happened was the colony of Massachusetts, and most specifically the city of Boston, was well known for lots of smuggling enterprises. Okay, John Hancock and others got filthy freaking rich off of smuggling tea and other products into Massachusetts, avoiding customs duties, which is why, okay, they were so pissed off at the Tea Act because that made the tea imported from the British East India Company far cheaper than the tea that they smuggled. So basically, the Tea Act was effing up their business, to put it in the plainest of terms, okay? Coinciding with that, they felt that such a regulation interfered with their economic and enterprising rights, okay? They were not pleased at all. The Tea Act was certainly within the power of the British Parliament to pass, and they did it to benefit the British East India Company. All right, it wasn't anything personal against the colonists, but the people in Massachusetts felt some type of way, most specifically the smuggling enterprises. So that, ladies and gentlemen, right there is where the anger came about, because the smuggling enterprises were hurt thanks to the Tea Act, because the Tea Act made the British East India tea cheaper than the Dutch tea that the smugglers regularly brought into the colony and sold to the people. So basically, the Crown and Parliament through the Tea Act were effing with their smuggling businesses. It's all about business here, okay? Their smuggling businesses were hurt by the Tea Act, okay? This wasn't an illegal or unjustly imposed tax, okay? It was a law that interfered with a criminal enterprise, smuggling, all right? So as a result, the smuggling entrepreneurs, is the best way I can put it, in Massachusetts, in collective agreement with the Sons of Liberty, they band together and prevent any of this tea from being unloaded to be sold to the general population. I'm just phrasing this out so that it's most easily understood. They refused to allow the tea to be unloaded at port so that it could be sold. And yes, they stacked their guys along the dock to prevent anybody from thinking about they were going to unload this tea from the British East India Company, messing up their business. Now, there was a deadline that this tea, if it was not unloaded by a certain point, would have to sail to England, okay, return to England. I don't know what they were going to do with it at that point, but it couldn't stay in the port of Boston forever, all right? So the Sons of Liberty and other related individuals took action before that could occur, all right? Before the tea had to be returned to England, they decided to destroy the cargo. So on the night of December 16th, 1773, the Sons of Liberty, some of whom disguised themselves as Mohawk Native Americans, boarded the ships in Boston Harbor where the British East India tea was stacked and so perfectly designed. They boarded those ships, illegally, by the way, and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, okay? Destroying $1 million worth of perfectly good tea, okay? An absolutely outrageous, unacceptable action. Literally an act of domestic terrorism, if you ask me, okay? These individuals, okay, obviously felt that it'll be a cold day in hell before they let this tea leave this colony and go back to England. They were going to destroy it, and that's exactly what they did, destroying $1 million worth of tea by throwing it into Boston Harbor. And as a result of that, England absolutely clapped back with what became known as the coercive acts to punish Massachusetts primarily, but also to tighten its grip on the other colonies as well, okay? One of the key leaders of this Boston Tea Party was none other than Samuel Adams, the older cousin of John Adams, okay? That being said, we see the intolerable acts come about, again, to punish Massachusetts and for England to assert its authority over the rest of the colonies. The intolerable acts are covered in another video, and they are the last series of laws which will lead to the formation of the First Continental Congress, which of course precedes and leads us into the Revolutionary War, okay? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole matter, and that's why you had the Boston Tea Party, ladies and gentlemen. Anything but a tea party, but really an act of domestic terrorism that when England, of course, had to deal with it and punish it, you know, the perpetrators of this act are now crying and playing victim, okay? But I'd love to hear what you think about it all. Leave them in the comments below, and we'll have friendly civil discussion on it. Take care of yourself. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you at the next video. Professor Shelton, out.